Hey everyone, welcome to Everything Except the Law, Best of 2021 edition. I am your host, Nick Werker. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all the parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school. Now, over the past 12 months, our show has welcomed some really incredible guests, and in this episode, we'll be revisiting some of my favorite interview moments from this year. You'll get to hear from CEOs of legal software companies, longtime attorney coaches, legal authors, and even a few lawyers. We hope you enjoy this best of episode and have a joyous holiday season. We'll see you in 2022 with new episodes of the Everything Except the Law podcast. Something you recently wrote about that I was just reading too is you wrote about, that you wrote about the importance of celebrating successes and how doing so can reduce stress. And I can kind of see where you're going with this, but I want to hear it. I want to hear it from you. Is what does celebrating these little triumphs do for you, and how is it a valuable practice for lawyers?
That's a great question, because when we do our annual planning process, we start asking, well, what did you celebrate? And then what will you celebrate? And almost every time you put your hand on your head and say, I didn't do anything to celebrate last year or that thing, because we check things off our list. All right, what's next? I expected that to happen, or that should have happened, so I'm not going to celebrate it. And then there's the whole, well, maybe I'm not worthy of celebrating. And the problem is if you don't, I'm not a brain scientist, but I like to read what they write, is it starts to affect the chemicals of your brain if you don't give yourself moments where you can stop and appreciate what's happening and recognize what's happening. And when you do, when you have that little celebration, you get a little dopamine hit and you start to feel better. And, it doesn't have to be a big celebration. It can just be at the end of the day, taking a moment to reflect that these good things happen today. It could be part of a gratitude practice. But that if you continue to grind and you don't take a moment to recognize and celebrate, whether it was a win at a hearing, or you had a great experience with a client, or somebody said thank you, or a staff member went out of their way to help, or you had a great evening with the children, if you don't take a stop to recognize that and celebrate that it happened, you're going to go through 10, 20 years and wonder, what the heck? And the science of it is taking that moment to celebrate that does give us a little bit of a chemical lift in a good way. And you'll want more of it, and you'll do it again and again. So it doesn't have to be a great big celebration like you're going on a trip, but just stopping to say, yeah, that was good. I appreciate that. I got a great, I asked one of my clients, I said, what was your last 6 months like with me? How did it work? And I got this lovely email about how her practice is better, but her mental state is better. Her mind, she's more relaxed. She's more confident in her relationship with money. She's not taking on clients she shouldn't take. And she feels better about her practice. Her relationship with her husband's better. And I'm just looking at that, just celebrating that for a minute. Like, that was remarkable. I mean, she came to me for time management, and look at these other things that we're doing. And I didn't prompt her for that. I just said, what was it like? So lawyers who even ask their clients that and get that kind of feedback from themselves, that's something to celebrate. There's a lot to celebrate every day, even in a pandemic, if we can just focus on it. The problem is, as a society and as lawyers, especially, we're skeptical, and our receptors are much more tuned into negative than they are to positive. And to the point where sometimes it's just not cool to even admit that something was possibly positive. And you're somehow stupid if you think that positive things happen. And that's just a self-defeating game.
When the pandemic hit in March of last year, or February, whenever it was, there was I wasn't caught off guard in any way. I have been living my life in a way where I practice every single day facing what I'm most afraid of, going towards that which I'm most afraid of, developing myself into a person who no longer is acting from a place of reaction, which we all know what that feels like. It's that grumpy lawyer who's just angry and really can't actually control their emotions, which is fine. I was there, and you don't have to stay there. To becoming a person that can actually choose to respond. And I believe that there is no greater path to doing that than stepping into the path of entrepreneurship and being a business owner and learning to be a leader and a role model in your community, and recognizing that your law degree is one of the most valuable assets that you possibly have, but not just for you, for your whole community when you use it in the right way. For your family, for the people that you serve, for the people that you're going to hire, the companies that you're going to work with. And if you don't capture the value of your law degree because you don't know how, or because you're too scared to, or because you want to keep doing things the old way, or because you want to, be the most affordable solution for the people in your community, but you're actually not being the most affordable solution for the people in your community because you actually can't provide them with a good service, so it actually costs them more money. We teach something called the affordability paradox in the book. Then you're not actually doing what you came here to do in the world. You're not actually doing the thing that you invested all the money to go to law school to do and the time to go to law school to do. And so, yeah, I want to encourage you to step up. We need you now to do that. And so I hope that you read the book, New Law Business Model, and get inspired to do so.
When it comes to adopting technology, certainly looking at case management software goes without saying, right? It's, as we were saying kind of earlier, without it, it's impossible to scale. And at the end of the day, lawyers, attorneys, you guys are there for the lawyering, but at the heart of it, your business is a service business, and technology can help you provide better service for your clients. So not only does that mean more referrals, it means growth. It means you just going home every day knowing that you did a job well done and that your staff did as well. But at the very least, if you have 10 cases and you feel like you can track those in Google Sheet or Excel sheet, there's two things that I always tell people. And again, this is for people, if CaseBuilder is not a good fit for you, okay, but here's the two technologies you need to adopt. First of all, if you're using a 2007 version of Microsoft Word or a 2000 version of Microsoft Word, which I also have seen, unfortunately, far too regularly, it's time for an upgrade. I know people don't like change, especially when it comes to technology that they sit in all day long, right? All of a sudden, all the buttons are in a new place. And I mean, I recently upgraded to Office 365, so I relate. It's a change, but it was time. And those fundamentals power your business, right? So you're leaving functionality on the table, productivity, and at times security. So updating your, suite of, probably you're up to Office 365. That's really what we should be seeing. And especially if you're using different softwares, it also opens up really exciting integration opportunities that you don't have with a desktop version. So, and the other thing that I think is really important in this day and age, and this is more in your wheelhouse, but it's e-signature functionality. Right. And again, if you're using case management software, it's coming, probably it's integrated or something like that. So that's great. But again, at the very least, look, you're getting the calls. You need an easy way to sign them. And clients aren't coming in person as much as they used to. Right. So whether it's Adobe, a HelloSign or DocuSign or something integrated in a legal software, you need to make it as easy as possible for a client to sign up. So those are the two technologies that I just think law firms can't do anything without. Of course, layering in, making sure every call gets answered, making sure every lead is tracked. I mean, everything's important, but those are some two core fundamentals.
So back to your question, what are some of the mistakes that I see law firms make when it comes down to their Spanish marketing strategies? Well, I guess the first and most obvious one is trying to replicate their English marketing strategy in Spanish. And just doesn't work, right? Different message, different target audience, this different demographic group. You should actually think and create the message based on who they are, what are their needs. The best way of doing that is actually interact with your community, bring people from the community to your law firm, right? And if you are a small team and you cannot just hire someone from the Hispanic community just, to make your law firm more diverse, you probably had already Hispanic clients. So take some more time to learn about them, to have conversations with them, right? To get to know their communities, right? If you cannot do your own community outreach events, then go to community events of the Hispanic community to learn more about them. So educate yourself and create a message based on who your Hispanic market is, how do they communicate, how do they talk, what are their interests, what are their concerns, and not imposing them on them, because that's your strategy in English and that's what you've seen work in English. Another issue is not finding the right partner to do so. The reality is that if you don't speak Spanish and if you have no experience in marketing in Spanish, chances are that you're not going to have great results marketing in Spanish, because marketing is not easy, right? Anyone who is trying to convince you that marketing is an easy thing, it's really not, right? And that doesn't mean that you cannot do it. Every single platform, be that Facebook, Google, TikTok, you name it, they're making it as easy as possible for you to run campaigns, for you to create content, for you to actually put yourself out there. But that doesn't mean that you're going to have success at it. It's the truth. So having the right partner to help you make that marketing strategy a success will definitely have meaningful results. And I think the last part is people who actually do the first two things that I've mentioned here. They do have a general awareness of the Hispanic market. Heck, they may even have Latinos working in the law firm. Then they have a partner, or they have a way that they can actually create a decent Hispanic marketing strategy, but then they don't have the internal processes to really serve those Hispanic clients in a frictionless way, right? So make that experience a great one. And the reason why I think the third mistake, people don't see it as necessary or that meaningful or that critical, is because there's not a lot of law firms right now that are doing a great job at it. And so by doing a pretty mediocre job, you can still see results. You can still get away with it because there is no one yet who is doing a terrific job in your market potentially. But the moment that someone starts doing an above average job in the client experience and in everything else that we've just mentioned, everybody else is going to be left out, because they're not going to be attractive enough anymore to the market. And so I think the Hispanic market is a great example of how a lot of law firms have been able to get away with a lot by doing very little. And that's coming to an end very soon.
I'm curious, from your perspective, and the reasoning behind it, is how important is it for people who are running and managing law firms to be checking in with their staff to see how they're managing during these uncertain times?
Well, I think it's like any management 101 book would tell you, check in with your staff frequently, right? Even prior to COVID. That's a skill that is, really very necessary, I think. When you have a life or death experience like what we've gone through, that just raised the ante a little bit more. And I think one thing is recognizing that there's diversity within your staff, and there'll be some staff members that may present as if being just fine and might be suffering or might be having difficulty adjusting in private. So it's good to know to have a good relationship with your people so that you can tell, where you may be intruding, if it's outside of the business scope, But the one thing that we saw about the pandemic was that boundaries got blurred to some degree, right? and it was in how do you say it? I'm bilingual, so sometimes I start wanting to say stuff in Spanish. Excuse me. When boundaries get blurred, what happens is that then the guy that was just your boss didn't really ask you much is now asking a little bit more. And that was very appropriate considering the circumstances. I think in COVID, a lot of people showed that they were able to continue to have this dialogue with their staff about how are you doing, what's going on at home, because they're wanting to make assessments as to, when are people going to start coming back into the office? How's Nick doing at home working on his stuff? Do I see anything going on where I might be able to help him? So I think that, as I said, we talk business always talks about having good communication with your team, right? And that varies depending on the culture within any office or organization. Everybody has a different way of reaching out to each other. And so I think it was very important here for people to really know where everybody was at emotionally. And then also for those that were, having some stress symptoms for a period of time is, to sit down and talk to them or figure out how that they could better support the people is super important.
When it comes to interviewing people for positions at a firm, are there any specific questions that you recommend lawyers ask? And if not specific, what do you recommend that lawyers do when interviewing people?
Absolutely. So, and all the employment attorneys who are listening will appreciate this. So before you go ahead and create your interview questions, please check with your employment law attorney. There are rules by state that basically regulate the kinds of questions that you cannot ask. And so those rules change all the time. I'm going to throw out some questions that I think are legal in the state of California, but again, check with your employment law attorney before you use any of these questions. So one of the questions that I like to ask is it's actually a style of interviewing. It's called behavioral interviewing, where you ask them to tell a story about a time when they did something. So tell me about a time when you actually went to a networking organization and built some referral relationships and how that worked out for you, right? Or tell me about a time when you had a really, really challenging client. What did you do to give them a great result and to make them satisfied? And so by asking those open-ended questions, so tell me about a time, those kinds of things, it forces them to provide more than a yes/no answer. They now have to elaborate and they have to tell a story. And in the course of telling the story, it may lead to other questions. It's also harder to make up an answer when you're telling a long story. It's far easier to do it with a yes or a no type thing. So asking those behavioral style questions is good. The other thing I'd encourage you to do is give some thought beforehand about what the values are for your firm. And the values, as I define them, are the unspoken promises that you make to other members of your firm, to your clients, and to your colleagues. And the reason that's so important is you want other people joining the firm that share the same values. Once you understand what those values are, you can then ask questions that will elicit responses that will tell you, is this person a good fit with our organization or not? For example, if one of your values is fun, you might want to ask, what does a fun workplace look like to you? And see what they say. And the third thing is do not be afraid to use tests. I can't tell you how often this happened. One of the reasons why I wrote the book was I would be working with a client. I'd say, go hire somebody, and they would. And then this attorney comes in and they don't do the work. And all of a sudden they realize, oh my gosh, this attorney basically exaggerated their skill set. They don't have the skills, they don't have the quality, and it's just a complete miss. And so what we found is that implementing tests for candidates is really, really helpful. It helps reduce the likelihood that someone's going to join with a skill set that's a mismatch for the role.
There's so many technology solutions that are available. They can make choosing this like new tech for your firm an overwhelming process, right? There's so many options now. Not really in banking, as I've established, but in other like the practice management, the intake, the payment system, whatever have you. What can lawyers do to make that process simpler And what are your recommendations as far as choosing these solutions?
I would say you have to evaluate those things on two, maybe three dimensions, but I would say at the high level on two dimensions. One is products and features that are most important for your law firm. And so I would say you evaluate the product and the service, right? And I think both are very important, right? So from a product perspective, look at not only the features that PMS provider or payment provider or, whatever platform you're trying to evaluate, but also evaluate their product roadmap, right? What is their development capacity? One of the things that probably most people don't ask is that, hey, how many developers are in your firm? So if there's a firm that has 200 and there is another firm that has 10, I assure you that, in the long term, you're better off going with a platform that has more developers because they're going to build more relevant stuff, right? And so then you also need to talk about, integrations. Who do they integrate with? What does that look like? How is it seamless? Is it a single sign-on? Is there, except so really those are all product type of questions. But honestly, you don't have to be super techie to be able to say, listen, how large is your development team, right? Who else do you integrate with? Because if you've got other platforms that you integrate with, or apps that enrich the experience, then, you're probably better off because, your needs will evolve and it's very difficult to re-platform, switch to another platform. So think ahead, right? So if you're starting a new practice, and we speak with a lot of attorneys that they do, right? So one of the things that we try to do is not only talk to them about our product capabilities, but also talk to them about our roadmap and what's coming. Mm-hmm. And the difference between, speaking with specialists versus generalists, and I think that's the whole theme of, our discussion, is actually, specialists understand your business. So we know that one of the first products you need as when you start, your practice is a business credit card. And, and so when you speak with someone that says, listen, you need an IOTA, you need a business checking account, you need a consumer checking so you can pay yourself. If you don't, have one, it probably makes sense to have it on one roof so it's all fully integrated. And for sure, you need to have a business credit card that also accounts for all your expenses, right? That's an example of that. And then after that, you can kind of, say, hey, I need the following products. Here's what makes sense. Here's what makes sense for you as an attorney, given this practice size that you have. And so, to me, selecting a technology provider is no different. Try to understand the roadmap, try to understand their capabilities and their focus. And that's how you make your decision. Because once you got on the platform, it's just painful to switch 2-3 years from now.
So for any of our attorney listeners who may still be resistant to go in on adopting legal technology solutions for their firms, what would you say to them?
That they're making a huge mistake. And ultimately, again, whatever your goals are, right? If it's to try to be more efficient, if you want more time, going and adopting these things will help you have more time. If you want to go and have better communication with your clients and provide a better service, it'll help you provide a better service. And if it's about your bottom line, because you're able to go and have more time and provide a better service, presumably it would go and help your reputation as well. And you would be able to go and service more clients, have a better reputation, and it would positively impact your bottom line. And, again, it's interesting, and I didn't say this when we were talking earlier, but if you go back to the beginning and you had, the yellow pages, there were older attorneys that poo-pooed even being in that, and they got left behind. And then you had the adoption of the internet. And the people who went and adopted to that, understood it, and were able to go and harness it, have done tremendous. And the people that haven't have been left behind. And I like to say this, and particularly now, you could be the greatest attorney in the world, but if nobody knows who you are, it doesn't matter. You can be the greatest attorney in the world, and if you're not communicating with your clients in the manner that this day and age dictates, you're not going to be as successful as you want to be. And so all of those things are so tied in to legal technology. Again, I would not be in the position that I am at this point in time, no question about it, had we not gone in and adopted it. And again, we're always on the lookout for what's next, what's better. Again, trying to fix the issues that we have as a firm. Even though we do this at a really, really high level, you can always improve. And I mean this. I mean, again, that the legal technology and the things that we've adopted at Luftman Heck and Associates have been absolutely integral in our success. Bottom line.
You know, they've been saying this for a decade now. Content is king. Is that still, do you still buy into content is king when it comes to SEO? And if so, is blogging still one of the main driving forces of that for law firms?
Yeah. I mean, some of the biggest case studies that we have are those of which that really invested heavy into content. For example, we work with Ben Crump. He's a civil rights lawyer. He represented the families of George Floyd and Trayvon Martin, right? And
I knew that sounded familiar to me.
Yep. And so about 2 years ago, he didn't really have an SEO strategy, right? He had a website that had maybe like 15 pages of content, right? And we started to go aggressive and we started to publish 400,000 words of content every single month. And we weren't using like any AI at all. We were like handwriting all of that content each and every month. Fast forward 2 years, now the site ranks for like 40,000 keywords. It has an SEMrush value of like $8 million per month. And, SEO is really theoretical or practical, and we like to look at the practical side of SEO based on some of the case studies that we've developed. And that right there just kind of proves, that's just one case study, but that proves that content is king, right? If you do it correctly. With regards to blogging, I think blogging is more of like a term from like the 90s. It's okay to blog, but blogging isn't, that used to be how you basically update like a WordPress, right? Because WordPress was originally kind of like a blog, right? And if you wanted to publish content, you had to publish a new blog post, right? Nowadays, it doesn't have to be in the form of blog. If you set up your website correctly, you can have an FAQ silo where you're writing FAQs. You can have another silo that has all of your different practice areas. You can have, as long as you're publishing content on a regular basis, that's perfectly fine. Like Hennessey, our agency, we do have a blog, and we do an amazing job with our blog post. But that's really like our outlook on the world. And we've got interesting posts about some of the conferences that we attended, or, hey, we just, had a change in leadership here, so like it's more of internal communication that we kind of share with the world. But blogging is not necessarily like the secret to SEO anymore.